Good morning. I hope your Tuesday is going well. Let's jump right into it today. Today we're going to talk about the factors that influence climate. Now we're going to pretend that we are in class. I realize you cannot respond to this video directly to me, but you can respond there where you're at. Can anybody tell me what climate is? That's right, it's the long-term average weather conditions that occur in a particular region. Now, there are two main factors that determine what the climate of an area is. Do you remember those two factors? We've talked about this before, and it's definitely in our notes for today. We're on the factors that influence climate notes. Yes, they are temperature and precipitation. Now, those two factors do influence the type of climate that we have. Those things will be determined by factors such as how near a particular region is to a large body of water. Mountains will affect the climate. Other sources, cold air masses, warm air masses, those sorts of things will also affect climate. But we can also see within climates, we see what are called microclimates. Microclimates are those areas, microclimates are those small areas with climate conditions that differ from those around them. So you may have an area with a lower temperature. If you're in a polar region, you might find a lower, warmer temperature or higher, warmer temperature that is there. Or in a warm area, you might find an area with a lower, colder temperature. It might get less rain, it might get more rain, just depending upon factors, usually geography, that will affect them. Here you can see the some of the temperature zones that you'll find. Altitude, of course, will be a major impact in temperature. It doesn't, or in climate, it doesn't show there. Some of these highland climate zones, you definitely see those in Central America. Those highland climate zones are very prevalent there, and it's not totally based upon latitude, distance away from the equator or the poles, but it can be influenced by that as well. But in a highland climate, that altitude becomes very important. It's not really a microclimate because that's one of our climate zones and the things that affect it. All right, let's talk about the main factors that influence temperature. You have several here. You've got latitude. Earth's surface is divided into three temperature zones based upon latitude. You've got the tropical zone, anywhere from 23.5 degrees north and south latitude to the equator. That would be your tropical zone. That's your area here in the tropics, your Tropic of Cancer, all the way south to your Tropic of Capricorn. This is your 23 degrees, 27 degrees north. So we're looking at that area right there. 23 degrees, 23.27 degrees is our tropics there. Then you got your polar zone. Polar zone is the cold climates that the sun strikes the ground at a lower angle because of their how high latitude they are. The sun doesn't strike them directly. It's not going to come down straight. It's going to come at an angle, and because of that, you lose a lot of the power of the light wave, and it's not as warm. Sunlight is not going to be as warm, so you're going to end up with a colder region. So latitude is the first factor that influences temperature. You got your temperate zones. Sorry, I skipped that one. Polar. You got your tropical zone, your polar zone, and your temperate zone. That's in between your tropical zones and your polar zone. So it's going to be temperate. You're going to have a temperature in between the extreme cold and the extreme heat. It's going to be very nice. You're going to find a lot of your this is where you'll find a large portion of your population within these temperate zones, because the temperatures are nice and cool. You'll also find a great deal of agriculture because of the more moderate temperatures as well. But interestingly enough, most of your biodiversity, your animal life, is going to be found here in these tropical zones. Less animal life, less human life in the polar zones because of the extreme cold temperature. The second factor that influences climate is altitude. That's the distance. That's your distance from sea level. As you get higher in altitude, the temperature decreases, and that will change that factor as well. So altitude is a factor. The third factor is the distance from oceans and lakes. Large bodies of water influence temperatures because water heats up, cools down more slowly than land. You end up with land breezes and sea breezes that brings a cooling effect. We experience that here in South Florida. That is the major reason why an area like South Florida can be cooler than a area, say, like on the Great Plains, North Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas, Nebraska. It can be cooler, have a cooler temperature in the mid 90s versus versus 105 degrees in some of those areas, because we have that land breeze and sea breeze that blows through. Gives us a cooler temperature, even though we're further south. We're in a lower latitude, closer to the tropics than the Great Plains would be. So it's because we have the cooling effect of land breezes and sea breezes because of the ocean that changes the temperature there. You can see this in marine climates. You got relatively warm winters because of the ocean, cool summers because of the ocean. Continental climates, far inland from the sea, so you're going to have colder winters, hotter summers, because there's not the moderating effect of the ocean. Ocean currents also affect it. Places where you find cold water currents, you find a lot less moisture in the air. So your temperatures will tend to be cooler and drier. If you've got a warm water current, such as for instance, if you take the Gulf Stream that runs along the eastern coast of the United States and then across the Atlantic to Great Britain, it's a warm current. It brings with it a lot of moisture. Great Britain will get a lot of rain, but it'll stay warmer than other countries at its latitude. In South America, you got a cold water current that runs up the western coast of South America that brings cooler temperatures to areas like Chile, but because of the cooler temperatures, you got less moisture, and in fact, they're just right along the coast. You've got more of an arid, dry region. You got one of the driest deserts in the world, in the Atacama Desert, because of that, the influence there of a cold current. So ocean currents greatly affect the climate as well. Three main factors that affect precipitation, since precipitation is one of our factors. You've got prevailing winds that carry more warm, moist air or cool air over land. So those prevailing winds carrying that moisture will affect precipitation. If you've got winds that are dry, not much precipitation, not going to get a whole lot of rain. That's going to affect your climate. Presence of mountains. Mountains push air up. They force any moisture that is in the air to condense, and you'll get rainfall on one side of the mountain. And on the other side of the mountain, you have what's called a rain shadow. That is the downwind or leeward side of the mountain. Very low rainfall because the rain has fallen on the side of the mountain where the air has been pushed up and the moisture has been condensed out. Then you have changes in seasons. The sea and land bridges over a large region that change direction with the seasons. Those are called monsoons. We see those in places like India. The change in season sees winds blow inland or outland. If it's blowing inland, it's going to bring a lot of moisture, therefore a lot of rain into those regions. And in fact, they can find some pretty serious flooding because of the change of season there, and that can be quite a problem. Countries like I'm trying to think right now of the Bangladesh. Bangladesh has a problem with this. Several times they have had some serious flooding due to monsoons. People flooded out of their homes, so it can kill thousands. But they've come to rely upon these monsoons because these monsoons bring the rain that affects their way of life and affects their agricultural processes. It's necessary for those processes. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse at the same time. They both dislike it. They both hate it and love it. They hate it because it does often bring death and destruction, but they love it because it always brings always brings that necessary rain in order for them to grow their crops. Well, that's probably about the fastest I've ever gone through notes. Please look at your notes, look at the terms, go through the terms, make sure that you are familiar with them. Make sure you know what a climate and a microclimate is. Know the main factors that influence temperature, that is latitude, altitude, distance from oceans and lakes, and then your ocean currents. Well, ocean currents would go with distance from oceans and lakes. Main factors of precipitation, prevailing winds, presence of mountains, rain shadows, and seasons. Make sure you know what those things are, and if you do, you will be happy. Well, thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a great day. Remember, I love you guys, and see you hopefully soon. Goodbye.